Ann Mount, and I am the Education Director for the South Arkansas Heritage Museum. Our museum was begun about 5 years ago, but we officially opened 16 months ago. We are located in the Longino House, which is directly across the street from First Methodist Church on the corner of Vine and West Main. The house itself was built in 1910 by Dr. Henry Alvin Longino. He and his wife, Ellen, moved in 1911. Dr. Longino was a very well-known physician here, and he actually practiced medicine in this house for 16 years before he passed away. The house was designed by an architect from Texarkana, who did also design some other houses in Magnolia, many of which are gone now, and did many houses in Texarkana. We try to change exhibits every 3 to 4 months, but one of our exhibits is the doctor's office, and it's in the room in which he practiced. Some of our upcoming exhibits that we're planning to do a bridal exhibit, because we have numerous wedding gowns through the ages and pictures of brides from Magnolia and the Columbia County and the local area. We're planning on doing a sewing room in there, because we have antique sewing machines, we have millinery things for hat makers, we have the spinning wheel, we have a stretcher frame for a quilt or other things to exhibit how the things were made back then. I'm trying to think, we have several others planned. We kind of run out of time, and it usually takes a couple of weeks to take one down and set one up. So the moving and sifting through and organizing all of the different things, but we have different shows that will be coming up. And we are thrilled to have visitors. It's free admission, and right now we are open from 10 to 4 on Wednesdays. Occasionally we are open for special events on Saturdays. You would love to come and see this house at Christmas because it is gorgeous. Last year we had the day room where the doctor's office is now set up as an old school room, and we had all sorts of things in there from old school days. And in the corner we had a tree, and it was decorated like when I taught and when I was a little girl, and we would have a Christmas tree in the classroom. We'd make paper chains of different colors and stars and things like that. So that's how we decorated the tree in there. And then we had a tree here, a real big tree here, and then one in the dining room. Okay, so this is the entry hall. All of the woodwork and the floors of the house are original to the house. This is the parlor where they would entertain company. Of course, the fireplace is just beautiful. Many things in here are quite interesting. Over in here, we have a Steinway piano that was made in 1939 in New York and brought here by train. On top, we have just received 2 Victrolas, both of which somewhat work. The one on the left is much older than the one on the right is from the late 20s, early 30s. The other one is probably from the early 1900s. In this side of the room, over here, we have a harmonium, which was a pump organ, and they were only made for a short period of time because shortly after they started making the smaller ones, then electric organs came in, and people would buy the electric organs, so they quit making these in the late 1930s. The pink furniture in here came from Lois Jean's shop in Magnolia. There are quite a few musical instruments in here. This is a Russian instrument that was passed through a family that somehow ended up getting to us. Over here we have an auto harp that, of course, is not strung and terribly out of tune, but this is an antique auto harp. Other interesting things in here, the camera over here was part of Miss Donna Price's. It was one of her cameras, and Miss Donna Price was well known for doing gorgeous portraits of people in Magnolia. She actually hand tinted her portraits in the colors that the poser was wearing. Many children of my generation have pictures done by Miss Donna Price. Over here, which you can't see very well, this was a quilt that was made to raffle off in 1926, I believe. And it has people's names on it. It has businesses' names on it. It's immensely heavy, so we don't have it hung yet. But supposedly they made $1,600, and in 1923, $1,600 was big bucks to raffle this quilt off. And coming this way, this one was called the day room. And this is where Dr. Longino actually practiced medicine for 16 years. We had none of Dr. Longino's original equipment or really anything of his except his home. Some of the interesting, perhaps most interesting things in here is this prosthetic leg. This leg was found down on the Peace property down by Emerson. And because of a flood, they were out walking the land and had been in that area many times, had never seen this. And apparently it was washed up in the flood. They took it to Antiques Roadshow, and the expert there dated it to the Civil War. And it is petrified because it had probably been underwater for 100 years. But it's amazing. The sock is of a later time because it would have been hand knitted during the Civil War. But it has the toes carved in it, the straps and all of this. And this would bend actually at one time, but it's rusted shut. A fun thing we just got, this is a bill from the Magnolia Sanatorium. That would have been the Magnolia Hospital back then. It was 1943, August the 19th, 1943, when it was billed. The total for the bill for 4 days stay is $19.50, which is unheard of today. Some other things we have. This is interesting. This is from a drugstore in Emerson, and these were lick and stick labels for medicine. These are the original labels that were in there that we had to very carefully pull apart. But that's something very, very special to us. We also have Dr. Baker, who practiced medicine here for many years. We have some of his books, a piece from his prescription pad, and his card that told you when your next appointment was. These are some of their books that they did, Dr. Baker's, and there's one from another doctor, and what they charged people. And they would have a code after the name, and it would be that they were paid with cash, or they would be paid by check, or they would be paid by trade, in that the patient would bring in food or goods from the farm to pay the doctor bill. And in one of the pages, we know that he took out 2 children's tonsils and charged for a total of $15 for taking out their tonsils. The gentleman at the top of the stairs is very important to Lower Arkansas, particularly Columbia County. This is Harvey Couch. And without him, we would not have had electricity and phone service in the rural areas until much, much later. He's the one that started Arkansas Power and Light. And as a young teenager, he worked for Dr. Longino and for Dr. Longino's brother, Luther Longino, who owned Longino Pharmacy, which later became Longino Good and Lyle Pharmacy here. All of the things that are here are just for right now, temporarily, till we get our new cabinets set up in the butler's pantry. The house comes with a basement, and there's a very large attic too. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you, the carport was not original to the house. It was built on when Dr. Longino got his first car. And at the same time, the windows and the main staircase were added. I think they decided that staircase was too dark, so they added those two windows. But everything else was original. Around this way into the kitchen. The kitchen has been remodeled, needless to say. We do know that at one time there was a iron stove right over here. The house was plumbed and had electricity when it was built, so it did have an indoor bathroom upstairs, which most houses may or may not have had. In the kitchen, one of our neatest things is this house. It was built to half-inch scale of a house in Lamartine. Lamartine is about 4 miles north of Waldo. The family history from here, from 1859 to 1958. The houses no longer exist, but you can open the house up and the rooms are all there, and you can see it was added on to at one time right here. And of course it had no indoor plumbing because it was out kind of in the country, but later they did add a bathroom. This is the back porch, and they did add a bathroom back here. So they did get plumbing eventually. The table here, for all you baseball fans, belonged to Travis Jackson's, who was from Waldo, very famous player for the Yankees in the 1930s. This table belonged to his grandfather, so we feel sure that Travis Jackson had many a meal at this table. This cabinet is called a Hoosier cabinet, and they were well known. This was your baking station. You could open it up and put flour in a bin up here and then turn the knobs and put the flour down. It has an enamel top, so you can do your bread, knead your bread, and bake bread and so forth. This basket up here is a cotton basket, which is very, very old. That when they were picking cotton, they would put it in the basket. Some other things in here, there were cotton gins just catty-cornered across the street and down a little bit on West Main. And this is a souvenir from one of those cotton gins. It's a little tiny bale of cotton. And behind it, these are cotton combs. Before they had the cotton gin, they would have to literally put the cotton bowl between these and run them back and forth against each other to get the seeds out, which was quite a job. And they would do that with wool also. This scale is from the Magnolia Bake Shop. It's one of the original scales. It's cast iron. It's unbelievably heavy. And they would weigh the flour and sugar and so forth on that. And the Magnolia Bake Shop is the oldest continuously operated bakery in the state of Arkansas. So we're very proud of it here in Magnolia. Some other interesting things. This was a lunch pail that they would take to work. This is one of the fun things up here. It's a toaster. And I can remember as a little girl, my grandparents had a toaster like that. You flip one side down, put the bread in, let it toast, then flip it over and then push it back up and toast the other side. So those were something kind of nifty to have, early toasters. This is an ice crusher that's probably from the 40s or 50s. And just various and assorted cookware and things that they would use. So much of it was cast iron, which we still use some today, but most people have quit using cast iron things. This room was actually their pantry, but now we've changed it into something else, but it was originally the pantry in here.
And the smoothing irons there, the iron.
Oh, this?
Yeah, that's the big one.
This iron weighs probably about 35, 40 pounds. If you can imagine ironing with that, you'd have to heat it on the stove, and then, it would take somebody strong. And this one is not light, but it's a cast iron that would be heated on the stove, and then you would, iron with it till it got cool, and then you put it back on the stove and heat it up again. Real glad I don't have to do that these days. This is a nut cracker, and then you'd pick the parts of the shell out off of it. That's new. This is cast iron. This you would put on bacon when you fried it to keep it flat so it wouldn't curl up and all of that. This down here is a pressure cooker that is extremely heavy to pick up. Unlike today's, which are much safer, these had a tendency occasionally to blow the lid off and blow the food all over the kitchen. And your butter churn. So, this is the butler's pantry. And they would have had some kind of big cabinet here. We had one we just had torn out that was not original, and it was falling apart, so we were gifted with this piece of furniture, which we will put all the pretties that were on the staircase back there back in here. This is an ice box, and these are ice tongs, and the iceman would deliver the ice through this window, and he would put the ice in the top of the pier. It would have a metal liner, and he would put the ice in there, and that was your refrigerator or ice box, which many people still call them ice boxes. All of these quilts are handmade and have been donated by different families to us. On this side, this gentleman right here, Lee Jones. I'm very proud of Magnolia because they took care of Lee Jones for many, many years. When he was 5 or 6 years old, he got very, very ill. And physically he developed, but mentally he remained as a 5 or 6 year old. And the town took care of him. But Lee Jones wanted to be sheriff and always thought he was sheriff. So he would wear a plastic badge and had a cat gun. And he would come around and he'd walk around the square with his sheriff's badge and his cat gun, and he would sell gum and pencils out of a cigar box for a nickel apiece. And he was a very dear man and lived for many, many years. This gentleman here was Mr. Martell, who owned Martell's Barbecue, the best barbecue in the world. And the barbecue beans were fabulous. And he did many wonderful things for Magnolia and served in many important offices in Magnolia as well. So we'll continue to the dining room. This was a formal dining room, and they wouldn't have had an organ in here, but they would have had furniture and a table that would seat probably 12 at a time. And we know that Dr. Longino had many important people to dinner here. This archway, we think it was ordered and probably shipped here in pieces and put together on site. But the wood is all original, and it's such a beautiful arch, and then has the seating in here that you could have, visits or sit and read a book or something special in that. The artwork in this room is from all of the pieces are done by Columbia County artists. And because it's Magnolia, they did a lot of magnolias, and their heirs and others have been so generous to give us paintings of all the beautiful magnolia work that they have done. And one of the main artists was also an art teacher and taught several of the other people, so she was responsible for much of this work in here. This is a picture that was published in the Banner News in 1923. It was taken Christmas Eve day. And it may be kind of hard to see, but it's this courthouse surrounded by cars and horses and buggies and wagons, a few cars. Whole square is full. And the reason it was full was they were giving away a car. And you would register to, sign the entry form to win a car. And the sad kind of part to me was the person that won it already owned a car. But the whole square was covered. And this picture was taken, we believe, from the top of Longino Pharmacy, which was on the southeast side of the square. Another funny thing about this room is there's a hole in the floor right here that's about that big around. And what it was for was they had a buzzer in there that when the host or hostess was seated, when it came time to bring the next course of the meal out, they would just push the button and a bell would ring in the kitchen so that the cook knew to bring the next course out instead of them having to get up or just holler, which would be, you don't holler in a fancy dinner. But that's what the hole was for. And it's kind of fun to have that story in this house. This lamp here is a crystal lamp. This thing is unbelievably heavy. It weighs probably 50 pounds. And it's so beautiful, and it was a gift to us, and we're very, very happy to have it. And we just discovered today, which is great fun, there's a secret drawer in this piece. None of us knew about it. But down here, there's a secret drawer. The only problem is you have to kind of lie on the floor and push from the back to get it open. But people, could hide things there that they didn't want to have stolen or whatever. So that's a fun new story for us.
Is there anything in it?
No, rats. But no, we were kind of hoping there'd be $1 million in there, but no, such luck. Out here in the hall, right here, you have probably heard the term punch the clock. And literally, you would take this and you would punch in your number, and it would record when you started work, and then when you stopped work, you'd punch your number again, and it would say when you stopped, so they would know how much to pay you. And this is from the Bodcall Lumber Company that was in Stamps, and it was a huge operation for many, many years. And this, because it's cast iron, weighs a ton. Another one of those unbelievably heavy things. You can come around here and see the inner workings. The other thing here is memories from childhood to me are the parking meters that were around the square. And this is the head of a parking meter that was on the square. And it was a nickel for so long or a quarter for so long. And the time ran out, you had to pay a parking ticket. But thank goodness they don't do that anymore. But I can remember parking meters all around the square when I was growing up. Over here, this is a wedding dress for a bride in Waldo in 1935. And I had a lady yesterday tell me that she also crocheted a wedding dress for one of her sisters. She did it out of string like they would use to tie up packages in a merchandise store. It's just amazing, and the family had it put in the box frame for us. This is either one of the neatest things up here or kind of creepy that people are not sure about this. This is made out of human hair, It's called hair art. And it was very big in the Victorian ages back in the late early 1900s. And if a loved one passed away, they would take a lock of hair and oftentimes they would put it in a fancy pin, and it was called a mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, brooch. And they would wear that in memory of their loved one who had passed away. Over here, we have an early telephone that you would wind up and then you would talk on. And all of these were party lines. So you had one line, but each phone, if they dialed number 27, which was your phone number, but it would have a specific ring. But everybody on the party line down the way knew that your phone was ringing. And they could listen in on your conversations. And this, the speaker, which is very fragile, so I won't take it off, is very heavy. And I'm thinking, you know, you're sitting there for a long time holding that, trying to talk and standing up because they would be wall mounted. So it would be quite the thing. But to have phone lines, and Harvey Couch was responsible for getting phone lines into this area out in the rural areas. This pump organ still plays. I apologize, I cannot play it, but it's a pump organ. And these would be found in homes, but also in churches. So they were very popular. This picture here, this lady is Miss Nettie Hicks Kilgore, and she wrote the original history of Columbia County in the early 1930s. She was a teacher, amazing lady. We actually have her original teaching certificate from the late 1800s. And this is her wedding picture to Mr. Kilgore. This is Mr. Kilgore's father. But it's hard to see unless you're up close to it. But in her wedding dress, her waist was probably about this big around. They had that corset on, but she's a beautiful lady. Now we'll go into the gift shop, and it originally was a music room, but we have it set up like an old country store right now. And we have some interesting things in here. In an old country store, you could buy pretty much anything. So they would have, you know, horse yokes and gear. They would have lanterns. You could buy candy. You could buy canned goods. You could buy any kind of tools, coffee, sewing, mercantile fabrics, thread. These two cash registers, one is from Emerson, and the other one, we're not sure where it came from. We do know that it is very, very old. This safe was originally in K.S. Couch's store, which is where the Mule Rider store on the square is now. It was at that time a grocery store when he had this safe in there. We do not know the combination, so it could be full of dust or it could be full of $1 million. We doubt it's $1 million. But after Mr. Couch sold his store, it was moved to Taubel's department store, which is on the north side of the square where Stacy's and Khakis is now. This rifle was a Springfield rifle dated from 1851, 1852. It was given to us by the grandson of the owner. We know it was carried during the Civil War, and at the end of the war, the rebels were all supposed to turn in their weapons. Well, most of them, you know, were farm boys. They needed them to hunt. So many of them did hide them and keep them. This one, Mr. Jackson, who carried this, and we have a biography of his life, hid it in the chinks in the barn so he could get it out and go hunting to feed his family with. But we are amazed to have this thing. And this is another thing that is incredibly heavy. It's not like today's rifles are much lighter. This one had some heft to it, and we're lucky that we still have the saber and the ramrod to it. Over here, we have a few more things that you could find: snuff and Coca-Cola and so forth. Actually, we have a few things in here that are for sale, these beautiful baskets that are made from pine straw by one of our volunteers. And she hand weaves these out of pine straw, and they're just gorgeous baskets. And we also have honey, and the honey comes from the ancestors of the original hive. Before we moved into the house, we had a swarm of bees, and we were able to find a beekeeper that got them all cleared out and got the queen and in a hive, and then this honey comes from those original bees' ancestors that we, generations. So that's kind of a fun thing that we have for sale, and it's local honey and it's real good. Old country stores would have all kinds of metal signs and so forth. They would have a public notice board. What we have over here are wanted for bootleg stills, catch bootleggers, and Butch Cassidy or Jesse James, Bonnie and Clyde, which actually were killed just south of here in North Louisiana. And this is a copy of a sign that is and may still be there in the Columbia County Courthouse on the square. And it was signed by Dr. Henry Alvin Longino. He was a Columbia County health officer because tuberculosis was rampant and they had no cure for it. I mean, even little children died with it. The fun thing about volunteering here is I learn something new almost every day about Columbia County that I didn't know. I grew up here, but I learned something new from people that come to visit, and they say, "Oh, I know about so-and-so," and give me a story.
And it's been here for how many years?
The museum? The idea started about 5 years ago or more. It's only been open for 16 months when we could finally open it.
So how long did it take you to get it ready?
Well, a while. It took over a year to get it ready because we had to do a lot of repair work inside. It had to be painted. We had the floors refinished, roof work, because this is a tile roof. And fortunately, there is a gentleman here in town who knows how to repair tile roofs. After Dr. and Mrs. Longino passed away, the house was rented for 30 years by Bonnie Regan's grandparents. Bonnie and her brother Quentin are the ones that have Dunnywood. And the house was rented for 30 years by them. And then after they passed away, it was turned into 2 apartments, an upstairs and a downstairs. And there used to be a staircase in back for the upstairs one. Then the Woodwards bought it. So we really are the 3rd owners of this house.
You said it was rented for how long? 30 years?
About 30 years.
Did they make any changes in the house of any kind?
Not really. The kitchen was modernized at some point, and we think that was probably done or redone by the Woodwards when they lived here. So, and it was, like I said, it was rented out as 2 apartments for a number of years.
So
and
they added the little kitchenette upstairs?
Yeah, upstairs they had put in a kitchen upstairs, but that's been torn out. That was torn out when the Woodwards bought it. And replaced as a bedroom because they had 3 children. They needed the bedroom space. But upstairs there are 4 bedrooms and a bathroom, and that bathroom was original to the house.
I noticed you have the historical market.
Mrs. Woodward was the one that was responsible for getting this declared a historical site. Ann and Joe Woodward bought the house, and she had an antique store on the southeast side of the square. It's where Imperial Shoe Store was. And she was very interested in antiques. So they lived here for many, many years. And lastly, excuse me, I'll walk in front. The most important character in the story. This is a portrait of Dr. Henry Alvin Longino, who had this house built and apparently was an incredibly wonderful man, very generous. The neat story about this is that Dr. Moses Menendez, who is retired now but was a doctor here for many years, actually did this portrait of Dr. Longino. So we have a doctor doing the portrait of Dr. Longino. So this is the Longino House, South Arkansas Heritage Museum. Come see us.